In the town of Kurouzu-cho, Kirie lives a fairly normal life with her family. One day she walks to the train station to meet her boyfriend, Shuichi. He reveals his rising desire to leave the town with Kirie, saying that the town's infected with spirals. He explains his father has become obsessed with the shape, which soon proves deadly, beginning a chain of horrific and unexplained events that causes the residents of Kurouzu-cho to spiral into madness. Welcome to the world of Uzumaki spiral into horror, an anime based off of the classic manga series Uzumaki by Junji Ito, his magnum opus, I would say. And yeah, this is a series I've been looking forward to ever since it got announced 4 or 5 years ago. I'm a huge Junji Ito fan, so I couldn't wait for this. So the first episode covers the first 3 chapters of the manga. It covers the Spiral Obsessions Part 1, Part 2, as well as the Scar. So like I mentioned in the intro, we start off this episode with our main character, Kirie. She is walking through the town of Kurouzu-cho, and along the way she starts noticing like little spiral patterns like in the flowers and things. And she goes and she meets her boyfriend at the train station. Her boyfriend is Shuichi. He's like the secondary main character. He lives in the town, but he goes to a high school that's outside of the town, so that's why he commutes. As they're just walking together and catching up, Shuichi basically brings up the fact like, hey, have you ever thought about running away together? And Kirie is kind of like, what do you mean? Like, should we just get up and disappear? Like, why do you want to run away together? And he mentions that there's something wrong with this town. Haven't you noticed like all the spiral shapes everywhere? And we start noticing like little spiral shapes. Like they cross by the stream. There's a bunch of whirlpools. There's a bunch of whirlwinds that are coming through the town. The plants and stuff like that are all spiral shaped. Like spirals are everywhere. And he even mentions about how his father has become obsessed with the shape to the point where he's quit his job. He's locked himself in the room where he has just a bunch of spiral patterns everywhere. And he is so obsessed that he gets pissed off when his wife makes a bowl of ramen and doesn't have the Uzumaki toppings. When he goes and takes a bath, he has to swirl the bathtub water until it starts spiraling before he can get in. Like he is just absolutely obsessed with it, and it's messing with him like physically, mentally. Shuichi points out that there was a moment where his eyes started spiraling in opposite directions, and Kirie just kind of like taking this all in. She's listening but not fully like understanding what Shuichi's getting at. We do kind of have this cute little moment. I thought it was like a nice little touch where he explains about his dad and his eyes like spinning in different directions, and then she tries to mimic it but she fails. I thought that was just kind of like a nice little touch. It just kind of gives Kirie some character. Before I go more into the story, I will just say that the visuals for this is freaking breathtaking. Like I love it. It's in black and white, and it's very, very close to the manga. It's basically a mix of 3D, 2D, and rotoscoping. And in my opinion, it works. I can see why it took multiple years for them to get 4 episodes done, but I think that it was time well spent. It's beautifully grotesque. It captures the just gritty, uneasy uncomfortableness that Junji Ito's just perfected when it comes to his artwork. And even like the rotoscoping, not only does it just make the characters seem more alive with their actions, but there are times where there's just this slight uncanniness to it because you're seeing these like what should look like 2D characters imprinted on a 3D rotoscoped model. I mean, it looks amazing, but there's just a little bit of uncanniness, not enough to ruin the look, but just enough to kind of make you a little bit uncomfortable at times. So phenomenal choice. I love the visuals. So much better than the other recent Junji Ito series that I covered on this channel, Maniac. This is so much better. Back to the story. Shuichi just talks about how there's like spirals everywhere. He even looks at the sky. He sees like spirals like in the winds. There's a sound that goes off. It's like a siren, and it just bothers the hell out of Shuichi. And eventually they go their separate ways. And when Kirie shows up home, she notices that Mr. Saito, Shuichi's dad, is at her house, and he's talking to Kirie's father. And he basically is talking about how obsessed he is with spirals and how amazing Kirie's father's job is. His job is basically as a potterer, so he makes like pots and stuff, which if anyone has never made a pot before, you basically have clay and you kind of spin it in a circle and you mold the pot, and it kind of could create like the spiral effect. Mr. Saito is like just obsessed with this shape, and he even asked Kirie's father if he would be able to create a pot with a spiral design in it. And then that's when we cut to school the next day, where we see Kirie in her classroom and she's talking to her friend Azami. And Azami is supposed to be like the school beauty. Everyone that sees her falls in love with her. She has this scar on her forehead that's like crescent shape. And basically what happened was, one day when she was young, she was trying to impress some boys that she liked. And she was walking on the playground like a tightrope, and she fell, busted her head, and it created this crescent scar. And now it's gotten to the point where anytime any boy that Azami has a crush on sees the scar, they develop a crush on her, like they become attracted to her. I do think it's kind of funny how Azami is considered like the school beauty, when in my opinion I would say that Kirie should take that role, but that's just my personal taste, I guess. But Kirie decides to introduce Azami to Shuichi, and so after school she takes her down to the train station, introduces Azami to Shuichi. But as soon as Shuichi sees Azami, he like stares at her forehead, and the scar is hidden by some hair, but he just starts freaking out. And he basically says, "You're marked with a spiral." And he just runs out. He grabs Kirie's arm and just pulls her away. Azami starts to become obsessed with Shuichi at this point, because of the fact that everyone who's ever looked at her has like developed a crush on her and become like obsessed and attracted to her. And Shuichi's the only one who hasn't. Like as soon as he sees her, he's like repulsed by her. And that seems to just trigger something within Azami. Now she starts becoming obsessed with Shuichi. Shuichi grabs Kirie, pulls her away, and tells her like, "You didn't see it. She's marked with a spiral. You have to stay away from her." Kirie ends up going back home, where her father arrives and says, "Hey, I made the pot that Mr. Saito wants. Why don't you go deliver it to him?" So she goes to Shuichi's house to go deliver the pot. But as soon as she arrives, Mr. Saito is like, "Oh, I don't need that anymore. I realize that I can create spirals on my own. Check this out." And he basically sticks out his tongue and wraps it up into the spiral. And it's like, there's no way anyone should have a tongue that long. Anyone should be able to pull this off. Like there's just something very weird and unnatural about this. So of course Kirie freaks out and she runs away. And as she's running away, that's when this delivery man shows up, and he's like, "Hey, I brought your custom made item that you ordered." And that's when we cut to Azami, who comes across Shuichi and basically tells him like, "Hey, most guys I know all end up wrapped around my finger, but you're different." And Shuichi again starts freaking out, and he's like pointing towards her, and he's like, "What are you hiding behind your hair? What's that on your forehead?" And Azami's like, "Well, Kirie must have told you, but I'm glad she did. It's a crescent scar. I got it when I was a kid." And she reveals the hair, only now it's no longer a crescent scar. Now it has morphed into a spiral. And Shuichi explains, "I knew it. It's a spiral. You're marked with the spiral. Your crescent scar has twisted into a spiral shape. You have to get out of this town. Get out of here before it's too late." And Azami's like, "I can't. Like, why can't I stop thinking about you? I've never felt this way before." But Shuichi just runs away because he's just too freaked out about this. And then that's when we cut to a funeral. And it turns out that this funeral is for Mr. Saito. And they cremate his body. Shuichi walks away. Kirie follows after him to see if everything's okay. And he explains that there's something wrong with this town, and it has taken my dad. And he explains like, "Do you know how my father died?" And Kirie says, "Well, he fell down the stairs, right?" And Shuichi's like, "No, that's just a story that me and my mom came up with. What happened was we were out of the house. Basically realized that my dad was freaking out. Like he was just becoming so obsessed with spirals that it was messing with his life and with our lives. So we went to a hospital outside of town to see if maybe we should sign him up. Like basically send him to a psych ward. And when they arrived, it was very late. They couldn't find him, and they started searching the house. And eventually they came across a room with the custom item that we saw get delivered earlier. And it turned out to be like this giant pot. And when they opened it, they found Mr. Saito's body inside the pot, crushed in a spiral shape. Basically, the pot had like a spiral design in it, and Mr. Saito laid in there and broke all the bones in his body until he morphed himself into a spiral. and that's how he died. And now we see that as his body is being cremated, his smoke, like the smoke created from his body being burnt, is going up into the sky. And as it's going up into the sky, it's spiraling as it goes up and up and up. And once it reaches into the sky, it turns into a giant spiral. And then everyone notices it, everyone starts freaking out, and the spiral comes down from the sky and it goes into this pond. And Shuichi's mom starts freaking out. And she's like, look, don't you see it? It's him. It's my husband. He's laughing at us. He's becoming the spiral. And everyone looks. And I don't know if everyone sees this, but we, the viewers, can see that some of the smoke has kind of turned into Mr. Saito's face as it's spiraling. And it kind of has this like grotesque smile. And that's when Mrs. Saito just like passes out. And then that's when we cut to Kirie, who's walking down the town, and she comes across Azami. And at one point, like wind blows Azami's hair up, and we see a spiral like within her forehead. And it's now no longer just a spiral scar. It's now like being sunk into her head. Like basically a spiral hole is growing into her head. And Azami just runs away before Kirie can do anything about this. And then that's when we cut to the hospital where Mrs. Saito is freaking out. She's seeing spirals everywhere. At one point, she sees like a nurse has her hair pulled into a bun, and the bun is like spiral shaped. So she starts freaking out even more. We have a moment where Azami is talking to this guy named Okada. Basically, Okada stomps Azami, confesses his love for her. She tells him once again, like, you've already told me this before and I've already shot you down. I just don't have feelings for you. But there is something you can do for me. And then we cut to the classroom where we have this new character show up. His name is Katayama, and Katayama is slow. And when I say he's slow, I mean he's slow mentally and physically. He's just completely out there. And all the other kids kind of pick on him. Well, some of the kids pick on him about the fact that he's so slow and all this stuff, and they just kind of poke fun at him. We see them playing volleyball, and someone hits the ball towards Katayama, and he's too slow to react. So later on, when they're in the boys' locker room getting changed, the boys start picking on Katayama. They strip him of his clothes and pull his naked body out into the hallway for everyone to see. And as the boys start laughing, Katayama like rolls over onto his stomach, and we see a spiral shape on his back. Of course, the kids were kind of like freaked out, wondering what the hell that is. And then that's when we cut back to the hospital where Kirie and Shuichi have just visited Mrs. Saito. They're out in the hallway, and Mrs. Saito is different now. She is completely bald, like her head's shaved. Shuichi has to wear a hat. He has gloves on. And once he gets into the hallway with Kirie, he explains that his mom started freaking out and just started seeing spirals everywhere. Like she started seeing spirals in her hair, so she shaved her hair. She started seeing spirals on her fingertips, so she cut her fingertips off. So that's why I have to wear gloves. That's why I have to wear a hat to hide my hair. I will say that a lot of stuff here kind of got cut out from the manga. I don't know if it's going to be brought up in the next issue, but basically we see a slower descent into madness when it comes to Mrs. Saito. She doesn't immediately start cutting her hair. Basically, she starts noticing the spiral shapes. There's a moment where she sees like a centipede, and the centipede kind of turns into a spiral, and it kind of has like her husband's face. We see that even like the medicines that are being poured into her, like the IV, has like, it starts turning into a spiral. Basically, she starts seeing spirals everywhere, and she slowly starts descending into madness and freaking out every time she sees it. I don't know if I want to bring it up because, again, I don't know if it's spoilers, because all this happens in chapter 2 of the manga, but here we get chapters 1, 2, and 3 covered, and it's not in this episode. So I don't know if they're like saving it for the next episode or not. Let's just say that there's something that gets involved with hearing that drives Mrs. Saito insane. Basically, there's just more things here. So her descent isn't as fast as this episode makes it out to be. It's actually a little bit slower. That's one thing that I've kind of noticed about this episode, is the fact that it's very fast paced. So things just kind of happen. Like, I'm sure you've noticed that as I'm doing a scene by scene breakdown, I basically go, and then we cut to this, and then we cut to this, and then we cut to this. That's not how it is in the manga. I mean, it's pretty faithfully adapted, but in the manga things are more slower paced. It's not like boom, 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 boom. This happens, and this happens, and this happens, and this happens, and this happens. Things are a lot more drawn out. It's more of a slow burn into the horror aspects. If you're a fan of what you're seeing so far, I highly recommend checking out the manga. I think he does a better job of ramping up the horror. This one seems to just be a little bit too fast paced, but I'll get more into that after we finish the scene by scenes breakdown. But yeah, basically Mrs. Saito has just freaked out to the point where she can't see any spirals anywhere. And then we cut to nighttime where Kirie is walking down the road and she comes across Azami wearing a hat. And she asks Azami like, hey, what's wrong? And Azami says, I'm having trouble with my right eye. Can you see if there's something wrong with it? And she pulls off her hat and we see that her head is basically just nothing but like a spiral hole. And the eyeball is just like tumbling around in the spiral until it gets sunk in and disappears forever. And of course, this just freaks out Kirie. She starts screaming and Azami just walks away. And then we cut to a park where we see Okada, the boy who has a crush on Azami. And he has called out Shuuichi. And so Shuuichi shows up to the park and he's like, hey, where's Kirie? I thought she was going to be here. That's what you told me. And Okada says, no, she's not going to show up. I did this for a specific reason. And that's when Azami shows up. And Okada's like, well, I did what you told me to. I brought him here. Now will you go on a date with me? And Azami's like, no. Now that you've done what I told you to, I have no use for you. And Okada gets pissed off. And he's like, you said that if I brought Shuuichi here that you would be my girlfriend. So he gets so pissed off that he rips the hat off from Azami's head to reveal that now her entire head from the mouth up is nothing but a spiral. Her eyes are gone, her nose is gone, it's just a spiral hole. And Okada seems to be transfixed on it. And he basically just almost becomes like attracted to the point of like he's like getting sucked in. And he starts reaching out towards Azami's head and he literally gets sucked in. He gets pulled into Azami and basically just she absorbs him through her head. And Shuuichi starts freaking out. Kirie is running. She hears like a scream. She comes across her boyfriend hiding up in the tree. And he basically tells her like he's gone. Azami absorbed him. You got to be careful. And so Kirie goes and she looks and she sees what's left of Azami. Azami is basically being sucked into the spiral within her own head. Like as the spiral gets bigger and bigger, it starts sucking parts of her body in. And it's just really weird, very grotesque. Like we see her like limbs breaking and snapping so that they can fit into the hole. And eventually Azami becomes completely engulfed in the spiral and she's no more. She's gone. The spiral has eaten her. And so Kirie and Shuuichi just approach the area where Azami was just at. And now she's gone. There's nothing left but like just an indent on the ground of where she once was kneeling. And then we see just shots of the town. And then we get a close-up of a snail shell, which, yeah, I know where this is going, but I won't spoil that for you guys. But that's the final shot of the episode. It basically ends with a voiceover from Kirie saying how this was just the beginning of the horror that they were about to experience. And then we get the credits and stuff. I thought this was really good. I love this. I thought the voice acting was really good. I was listening to the Japanese audio. I thought it was fantastically acted. I already talked about the visuals earlier, but it's just, I gotta bring them up again. It's so good. Like I really love the visuals. It really does capture Junji Ito's artwork as best as you can capture manga artwork in an anime format. That was one of my biggest problems with Junji Ito's Maniac anime series, was that I felt like the more grotesque, unnerving moments, one, a lot of it was like censored, and the parts that weren't censored, it didn't really capture the grotesqueness that Junji Ito has perfected in his artwork. Like just look at any one of his panels from any of his works and you can just see like the level of detail that goes into just making things just really grotesque and unnerving and horrifying to look at. And I think this anime, at least this episode, did a really good job of capturing that. It very much feels like they just ripped off the manga panels and just animated it. Like, it's that close. So big props for the visuals. Yeah, I thought this was fantastic. I would say that my biggest nitpick, and this nitpick does not ruin the episode for me. Like, I still think it's a really good episode, but I do think the biggest nitpick is that the episode is very fast paced, which to me is, I don't know. When it comes to horror, I don't like fast paced. I like things that are more of a slow burn. I think that Uzumaki, I don't know how well they're going to be able to adapt it into just 4 episodes. I think for something like Uzumaki, you need more episodes than that. I do know that I think it was the director talked about how they were adapting Uzumaki and that there were a lot of things that they wouldn't be able to fit in just 4 episodes. So they would have to like cut some things and change some things around so that they can fit the 4 episode length and still cover the basic gist of the story. So we are going to be seeing more and more things get cut out, and of course things being more and more faster paced. But yeah, in the actual manga, things are more drawn out. They're more of a slow burn, and I think that does a better job of capturing horror, in my opinion, when things are slower, because it gives you more time to build up the tension and start, racketing up the horror. Whereas when things are more faster paced, it's just like, okay, we're jumping from one segment to the next, to the next, to the next. Yeah, there were just times when watching this, it was like, okay, first, like, our characters were here, and now all of a sudden they're here, and then all of a sudden they're here. And it's like, yeah, there's a passage of time. We don't really see it, but it just, I don't want to necessarily say that it seems like characters are jumping from place to place, but it does almost kind of seem like they were like, okay, we have to cover at least 3 chapters worth in this episode. Let's just take all the big moments that happen, and we'll just jump from that big moment to the next, to the next, to the next, without too much of a build up to those moments. Like, there's a build up, but not as much as there could be. And again, I completely understand. You're trying to fit as much as you can into 4 episodes, so things are going to have to get cut out. Things are going to have to be faster paced. So I'm not completely blaming the studio, because they're doing the best with what they got. Yeah, I do think that, I don't want to say it hurts the episode, but it does stop it from getting like a perfect 10 from me. But I'd give this episode like a 9 out of 10. Like, I thought it was fantastic. I freaking loved it. Again, I had just that little nitpick, but other than that, I think they're just really nailing the atmosphere, the visuals. This was fantastic. It was well worth the wait, and I can't wait to see what they're going to do with the next episode. I highly recommend checking out the manga if you haven't already. If you want to wait until after all 4 episodes before you dive in, go and do that. But at some point, please read the manga. It is freaking fantastic. And if you love what you see here, the manga is going to be even better, because the manga is going to be able to take its time with the story. But yeah, with all that said, this was fantastic. I am so excited to see more of this series. Huge props to everyone involved in this. This was amazing. So there you go. There's Uzumaki Spiral into Horror, episode 1. I will be covering the other 3 episodes. And I hope you enjoyed, and hope to see you next time. Take care. Later. Thank you for watching my video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you didn't, I still want to thank you for watching it this far, and I hope the next one is more to your liking. With that said, thank you once again, and I hope you guys and gals have a good one. Later.